Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast. We focus on providing you with timeless professional development secrets and essential business life skills in a mini bite-sized format. I'm unlocking the vault and sharing best practices that management consultants have been using for decades. We're unapologetically curious. Enjoy. So this episode, I get to sit down and chat with the author, Dave McKewon. And I have to tell you, he really made me pause, think, and then I did a dance. Oh, yes, I did. His new book, The Self-Evolved Leader, is such a great, inspirational, motivational, tactical must-read. It is actually for anybody that is seen to be as a leader or helping develop others, or even you as an employee that are looking for some inspiration from your leader. It really is the perfect reading reminder. He actually tells you and teaches you how to move from firefighting mode to empowerment. To stop working in the weeds and to give yourself time to think. Really build up the empowerment in your team. I cannot tell you how much I really enjoyed this interview, this book. It is going to be something I definitely am going to be giving away copies as gifts to people. And more importantly, I think it's a book I'm going to end up reading every year just to remind me of what kind of leader do I want to be seen as and my legacy and so on. And anyways, I can't wait for you to hear it. I can't wait for your feedback. And it's such a great interview. So I got Mr. Dave McKewon that is here with us today, and I am super excited because he's just launched this amazing book, which I can't wait for us to get down to it, Dave, because this is just really kind of got me a little bit dancing, actually. So I hear that you help individuals and teams, organizations really achieve excellence by doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. And you're the CEO of the Outfield Leadership and this author of this new book called The Self-Evolved Leader. Elevate your focus and develop your people in the world that refuses to slow down. And if that's not enough, Dave is also the host of an amazing podcast called Lead Like You Give a Damn and writes a weekly online column for Inc. Seriously, Dave, I am kind of really gobsmacked about all the things that you have accomplished.
Well, thank you, Sapna, and thank you for having me on. It's great to be here with you.
Love it. First of all, congrats on the book. I mean, I have to tell you, your book came at the best time ever, and I was actually reading it, and I really got so juiced up and really started dancing because I have been stuck in the weeds of some of my teams, and I couldn't see past and I couldn't figure it out. And your book is so tactical that I started writing notes from your book and then actually planning other strategies. It really inspired me.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it. And, that was one of the reasons that I wrote it or the way that I wrote it is there's so many leadership books out there that you read it and you go, oh, that's good. That's interesting. What do you want me to do with it? And so I wanted to ensure that there was definitely some very practical things that folks can put into place right away.
And it really is amazing. First of all, is this your first book that you've written?
It is, yes. First time author, so very excited to get it out there.
Oh, that's going to be amazing. So how was the overall experience of writing a book? I mean, being a thought leader is hard on its own, but putting pen to paper is, another amazing accomplishment.
It was funny. I purposefully gave myself as short a timeline as possible because I knew it was going to be one of those things that whatever length of time I gave myself, I would just use all of that time. So I gave myself 3 months and I wrote the first half in a month, and that seemed pretty, a tall order. Then I decided to get married in the middle month, so I didn't get much of a chance to write that middle month. And then I finished it up on the third month. And so there was a lot of focused writing. I tried to ensure that I blocked out kind of a lot of distractions to really stay focused on what I was doing. And, the reality is it's the sum total of what I've been teaching and training on for the last 15 years or so. And so it's not like I was starting from a complete blank sheet of paper. I knew what I wanted to say and where I wanted to go, but it certainly had some long nights and early mornings in it.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, honestly, the book is so well written. It resonates on so many levels. And I think that's what kind of really captured me. You've got a bit of a story going on. You've got the practical tips that's going on. It's just something that you can really consume and feel so empowered at the same time.
Yeah, and I wanted folks to have that sense and that feeling. I wanted to build a sense of momentum as you read through it. As you mentioned, I bring in some examples in terms of stories of clients that I've had in the past that are trying to put in place some of the lessons that we're talking about in there. And I just wanted it to bring it as real as possible to folks that are out there so that they could see themselves in the pages, so that it didn't seem like it was a foreign concept, but that they felt that they could touch it and they could truly be a part of it.
Oh, I love it. So out of curiosity, what inspired you to finally write this book? I mean, you're a speaker, you train, you teach, you coach, you mentor, and then, the book. What inspired you to finally write this book after 15 years?
Well, it came to a part, and over those 15 years, my career has taken a huge number of twists and turns and ups and downs. And the one thread through it all has just been this desire to see the more human side of leadership come through in our workplace. It just got to a point in my career where, for me, number one, I knew that I could help more people by just putting stuff down in a book and then allowing that to kind of go out into the world, right? It doesn't take me, I don't have to have a one-on-one coaching session or a training session with somebody to read the book. So I just knew in terms of impact, it would be broader in writing it. The other thing is, just quite frankly, in the industry that I'm in, at some point, people start to say, okay, well, you're doing all of this stuff. You're speaking and you're training and you're coaching. Have you written a book? Which is, to me, is a funny thing, because writing a book and being able to deliver a keynote speech are two very different skill sets, but yet we're still kind of joined those two things together. Like, I want somebody on my stage who's written a book. And so it just got to a point where, out of necessity, in terms of growing my own business, I knew that I had to do it. So those two aspects, impact and necessity, kind of came together to compel me to write it last year.
Well, I am so glad you wrote this book, because now you've managed to, hit other leaders that out there that are struggling and really make a bigger impact on the world, because it is so incredible. What got me is that your title is A World That Refuses to Slow Down. Has the concept of leadership changed?
I think it is changing. Two things are happening. One, as you know, our world is moving faster and faster and faster, and that's never going to go away. It's only going to continue to move faster, and we're going to be bombarded with interruptions on a much faster and more frequent basis. And I think just mastering leadership in that environment is causing it to change on one half, because we don't have time built into our day to think strategically or creatively. We have to find it. So that's one reason why I think leadership is shifting. I think another huge shift that is happening, that's been happening for the last 5 or 10 years and will continue to happen, is we're moving away from this concept of the leader as the hero, as the leader at the center of the story, as the leader who's the one that's sure on the direction that we're going and that compels people to follow them. There's that old saying that leaders know the way, they go the way, and they show the way. And we had this sense where we wanted our leaders to be so sure of the direction that we're going in. But the reality is, the world that we live in is so complex now that no one person can really know for absolute surety anything. And everybody else around us is starting to realize that. And so I think we're shifting to a model of leadership that's a little bit more vulnerable. It's a little bit more transparent, that says, you know what, I'm not 100% sure where we're going. Here's my best guess. What do you think? Do you want to go on that journey with me? I think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging, but let's go. And we're moving more towards this sort of collaborative sense of, let's create a compelling vision together and find out a way to set common goals and to hold each other accountable from a peer level and just go out there and make stuff happen. And I think that we're sort of stuck between those two worlds, where we know the old mode of leadership doesn't work. We're not 100% sure what the new place looks like, and we've got to find a way to lead in that kind of gray area.
It's really phenomenal, because one of the things that really it threw me for such a loop, and then it kind of went back to all my other past roles I've ever had in companies I've looked at. And I used to always see those hero awards, that they, at the end of the year, they gave these hero awards. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, it really does. And when I was reading your book, it kept reminding me of this hero award. And I kept thinking, it is awful, because it makes it sound like only one person was part of that success, when there was a team of people and we're only identifying the one person. Right. And it really kind of threw me for a loop when I started thinking about that.
100%. And, the concept of heroics, it's just embedded in our culture, whether it's sports, a quarterback throwing a Hail Mary in the last minute, whether it's the military, somebody, taking a really tough call or a difficult position, or movies, just the rise of comic book movies and hero movies. It's just so embedded in our culture. But when we translate it into the workplace, what happens is we sort of create a zero-sum game, which, like you said, means that somebody's going to be the hero and everybody else isn't. And what that does is, particularly if you're in a position of leadership, if you're leading through acts of heroism, ultimately what you're doing is you're making yourself the bottleneck, because you're the one that has to step in and save the day. You're the one that needs to know the answers. You're the one that needs to tell your team what to do. So you become overwhelmed and stressed out, and your team below you doesn't develop because they just go, well, my boss is just going to do it for me anyway. So why bother trying to come up with any solution myself? I'll just give it to the boss. And so we get trapped in this cycle where you're overwhelmed and your people are frustrated. And it's what I call the cycle of mediocrity in the book. And that's not to say that acts of heroism are not good things. They are great when they happen, but you can't build your leadership off of it, because over time you'll just end up burning out.
Well, you know what? Honestly, you're speaking about my past 2 weeks, and I honestly, that's why I said your book couldn't have come at a better time, because you made me really pause and think of what kind of leader do I want to be. Right. There was the leader that I've become recently, and it's been I have to save the day and go and do that, get into the weeds, and so on. And then when I was reading your book, and then you told me that, that I'm actually creating this learned helplessness. I thought, oh my gosh, is that what I'm trying to do? And I was like, it kind of was that aha moment of like, that's not what I want at all. And I had to redefine what I wanted to be seen as a leader, what kind of leader I wanted to be. And, because I was going down that dangerous path of actually always kind of saving the day and pulling that, the victory out because, oh, don't worry, I'll get it sorted, go into command and control mode, right, versus actually doing this. So I really thought this was really interesting, a concept of how you showcase the impact it has with your people, that they just start throwing things over the fence because you know what? You're going to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and it's not because they're not good people or they don't want to take ownership or accountability over what they're doing. It's just that over time you're teaching them that you're not going to allow them to do that. And it can just be small things, like somebody comes into your office and says, hey, here's a problem, what should I do? And you immediately say, do X, Y, and Z. They go, okay, awesome, you've got the answers. I'll go do that. I'll come back whenever the next problem arises. And one of the overarching kind of mindset or perspective shifts to make is to just spend a little bit more time pausing and rather than rushing in to just give that perspective. A simple thing in that situation is just to pause and say, okay, well, what options do you have? What have you thought about? What have you tried? What would you like to try? Putting back the onus on them to come up with the solutions takes you a 30-second to a 1-minute conversation, but at least then they are empowered to go solve that on their own.
And that is so brilliant, because that's what I loved about your book was actual tactical, those tips, because it made me stop because I got an email, of course, that happened, like it said, the universe aligned itself. I got a couple of emails last night that they were trying to do it, and they're like, how do I do what? How do I do this? And then today I actually responded. I know it's a Saturday, by all means I shouldn't be working, because I also noticed in your book that you're saying that good leaders, we need to actually demonstrate work-life balance as well, to kind of have that health check. And I actually paused and to say, here, have you considered, X, Y, and Z? And, have you spoken to this? Where else can you learn for draw from? And, what best practices are out there? What have we learned from the past? Right. And I actually said that. And then, and it was just such a nice feeling to kind of give them that empowerment back. And I didn't mean to take it by accident, going into this.
Sure, and that's the thing, and I say in the book that nobody means to do that. They're not stepping up to save the day because they're a bad person. It's just because there's a couple of things. One, in a number of cases, it's because we believe that's where we bring value. Right? We're supposed to know the answers. We're supposed to be able to help our people solve challenges by telling them what to do. And so there's an ego side of that where we kind of just feel like if I didn't do that, what would be my role? And then the second aspect of it is just through just sheer like speed and efficiency. We believe, well, it's just going to be quicker if I I just tell you what to do, or if I show it to you, or if I do it for you. And going back to that whole concept of we live in a world that's never going to slow down, we just think, well, okay, I'll just do this for you because then we'll move on to the next thing. And sure, I understand the concept of that, why you would do it, but over time then it just, like we said, makes you the bottleneck and builds learned helplessness in them.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I thought was really interesting is that it also creates everything more transactional, as opposed to looking at things in a much more holistic, strategic approach. Like, we're just becoming so transactional with this busy world. I need this, therefore, and boom, boom, boom. And that's why I really made me pause and think, what kind of leader do I want to be? Mm-hmm. And I was trying to actually kind of cultivate my own DNA, and that I wanted to make sure I inspired innovation and courage, not seen as a leader that comes in and saves the day and always comes and fixes things. And, and there is, this whole culture that has been there for such a long time that this kind of really does take time to kind of really rebuild these habits.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think, that reflection really is the first step. And that's why it's called the self-evolved leader, because this is about making a choice. It's about asking those questions of, what do I want to be known for as a leader? What's the legacy that I want to leave behind? And often, leaders can write out what it is that they want to be known for, but then, like you said, they've got some of those old bad habits, those old rituals, and finding a way to sort of redefine them is key in making this shift and making the transition.
Yeah, and for our listeners out there, is there maybe a tip you could share about moving away from the cycle of mediocrity and to the cycle of excellence, as you put it? Like, the words you use are so powerful too.
Sure. And like any good behavioral or life shift, it all starts with a kind of a shift in perspective. And the first thing that I encourage folks to do is to adopt a new mantra that says that my focus is to help those on my team achieve our shared goals, and in doing so, to help them become the best version of themselves. And the reason why that mantra is so important as an initial shift is there's no room for heroic leadership within that. Because if I succeed but my team fails, or even if one person on my team succeeds but everybody else fails, then I've failed as a leader. And if my people aren't growing and developing in what we're doing, if we're just achieving goals for the sake of achieving goals and they're not growing and they're not developing, then again, I've failed. And so for me, that mindset shift's hugely important to underpin all of it. Then there are sort of three simple to describe, difficult to put into practice steps to move through. The first thing to do is to reset your vision and to do that in collaboration with your team, to say, okay, where do we as a group want to go? What does 5 years out look like for us? What's the legacy we want to leave as a group? What's our purpose and our reason for being, rather than what's my individual purpose for being, although that's important. What's the group's purpose and reason to be? And getting the team to be co-conspirators in your success of that can really build ownership and empowerment over it, because then they get excited about the direction they're going in. Once you've set the vision with your team collectively, next is to build what I call your implementation pulse. And essentially that is a series of checkpoints that allows you to move between thinking about things on a tactical basis, which we do have to do, but also providing you with the time to think about things from a strategic perspective. So building a rhythm that says, okay, we're going to meet once a quarter, and on those quarterly bases, we're going to review our strategic plan for the year. Then we'll meet once a month and we'll review the tactics that we're putting into place that quarter. And then we'll meet once a week to ensure that we're tracking together to achieve those goals. One of the things that happens in our fast-paced world is we'll put together a pretty good annual plan, and a lot of people are doing that right now at the beginning of the year, and we feel really good about it. Then we put it in a drawer and we just go back to firefighting mode, and we just fight every emergency and crisis that emerges. So trying to build a drumbeat or a rhythm of implementation to get you to your vision is hugely important. And then the final step, just real quickly, I talk about 5 key disciplines that any leader needs to develop that will help them work their way through that implementation pulse and not get distracted, to stay focused on the collective goals that you have, to help your team hold each other accountable, to be disciplined enough to help coach your team to performance rather than doing things for them. So there are 5 key skills or disciplines in there as well.
And that's what I loved about your book, is like, it's actually a roadmap. It really provides you the roadmap, because it was neat that I got to, you described a vision of how you'd want to feel. And I was like, oh gosh, that's exactly what I want to feel. I would love to get to a meeting where people solve, the problems before I even, hear about them. I would love that. And, they're pushing for their own growth and development as opposed to me say, hey, have you done this? And it was just you gave me the vision and that feeling of what I want from my team.
Right.
So I have to say thank you so much for that. It's such an amazing, powerful feeling to know that.
That's great. And yeah, one of the things that's in it and in what I teach and when I'm working with my clients is that we've done ourselves a disservice by calling leadership a soft skill, which we've done for too long, because it's not a soft skill. Whenever we say it's a soft skill and we go, well, it's hard to train against, it's hard to measure, it's hard to define, it's hard to put into place, it's hard to practice. It's nonsense. Leadership, like any other functional skill, you can practice it. Is it sexy? Is it fun? Probably not. But does it get you what you want at the end of the day? Absolutely. And so what I've cooked into the book is those steps to say, okay, if this is an area you're struggling with, okay, let's take attention management, for example, which is one of the 5 key disciplines. Most people are getting overwhelmed by interruptions on a daily basis. And they're just focusing on anything that comes in at them at that moment. And so everything becomes urgent rather than allowing themselves to spend time focusing on the important. So if that's what you struggle with, okay, let's break that down. Let's start to just analyze the behavior. What does that look like? What does that feel like? How does that happen? What are all of those interruptions that you get on a daily basis? Okay, next, how do you start to prioritize those so that you're not just scurrying from place to place? Next, how can you begin to batch together some tasks and activities so that you can take them and go through them at the same time? And so all of a sudden we've gone from this like ephemeral sense of like, well, I get interrupted too much, and we go, okay, well then let's break it down and try to solve it. And all of a sudden people realize, oh, I can do this. I can walk through this and become a better leader as a result of it.
It's really amazing because I honestly had so many things of guilty moments going, oh, I totally do that. And it was a good reminder to be able to kind of go, oh, that's so not what we need to be doing. And in fact, since I've read your book, I actually took another one of your tips about keeping a journal for a week to write down those moments. And I was just like, how does it feel? And it was really amazing to kind of see how I was feeling in the beginning of the week, and by implementing some of your things, how I was feeling towards the end. Not saying all the results have happened the way I need them to happen, but right. I've started my own journey of changing how I want this whole team to operate.
That's great. That's wonderful. And that self-reflection is key to all of it, right? And for so many leaders out there, like I get it, like we live in a chaotic world, and I get that you've probably got a boss that's pushing down on you, and I get that you've probably got customers that are demanding things. I get that you've got a team that you've got to work with, and sometimes it feels like you're flying a plane with broken landing gear. You sort of think, if I could just land the plane, retool the landing gear, then would be okay. But the reality is you can't, because the landing gear is broken. You've got to find a way to fix it and fly at the same time. But just carving out small moments of reflection. What worked well this week? What did I not do well? What would I do differently next week? How did it feel? What was the impact? Just spending time and like you've started to do, take a journal to record some of your thoughts. Just elevating that time for self-reflection is it such a heart of what it means to be a self-evolved leader.
And it was funny else that I was checking out your YouTube channel and I was watching some of your tidbits. By the way, I really did drink the Kool-Aid in your world. And so I really was watching one of your, because there were nice little short mini bits of like 2 minutes. And I was like, right. This is awesome. Like I can easily digest it. And the one was about delegate to your team. And I'm actually on my way out for vacation. And all week long I've had, oh gosh, anxiety of like, what's going to happen when I'm gone? What's going to happen when I'm gone? And then I saw your little video about delegating and it's okay. Let them make the mistakes. And you know what? It's going to be able to solve. It was such an empowerment piece of it, of a reminder that we need to let that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we're scared to delegate because, well, for a number of reasons, it all, which comes back to you as an individual and your ego. But, people say, oh, well, it's going to take me too long to delegate, or, I'll get it done faster if I just do it myself, or I'm just going to have to fix it anyway because they're not going to do it correctly. The reality is, if either of those two things are true, then you don't have a delegation issue. You have a performance issue with somebody on your team. Like if you're literally saying, I can't delegate something to them because I don't think they're going to do it appropriately, well, then why are they working for you?
Yes.
What you really mean is, I don't want to delegate this because they're not going to quite do it the way that I would do it, or that I want them to do that. And in most cases, that's sort of just noise amongst the signal. And so that's why I encourage, whenever folks are delegating, be really, really clear on the end result. Like, what does the end result look like? And then allow your people to get to that end result in the way that they see fit. Even if it's not necessarily the route you would take, or you see some twists and turns there, because then they learn. And then once the job's done, have a quick debrief. How did that go? What did you learn? What worked well? What didn't work well? Here's what I saw. Here's maybe how I would have tackled it. And just give them some coaching and advice and guidance on that regard, rather than just being nervous that they're going to screw the whole thing up.
Oh, like words to the wise. So now I'm going to go on vacation and just let it be and see what happens. And they may find a better way of doing something than I could possibly ever do. So I am actually looking more forward to my vacation more now than ever. Thanks to you. So I have to say thank you so much for that. So, I found your book really interesting too, because it actually reads for whether someone is a brand new leader and even if you're a seasoned leader.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really clever that it was like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
was that by design? Was it purposely designed that way, or it just by accident came that way?
No, I purposefully wrote it that way. I wanted it to be, I kept having this notion in my head that between the poignant and the practical lies progress. So I wanted it to reflect some of those philosophical shifts in leadership that I'm seeing, but I also wanted it to be practical enough that people could put it into practice, and just to find a balance in there. And similarly, I wanted it to for a new leader to pick it up and go, I could do this and feel like I could do this, and it would get me off on the right foot. And the reality is, in most organizations today, the training for new leaders or new managers amounts to nothing more than a 30-minute webinar or a half-day orientation session. A lot of new managers out there with not being equipped with the skills that they need. So I wanted somebody to be able to pick it up and go, okay, I can put this into place. However, I also wanted it to be something that the C-suite could pick up and go, you know what? I have built some of these bad habits over the years. You know what? I'm good in, and I know that I'm good at certain aspects of my leadership role, but there are definitely things here that I can work on and improve to take it to the next step. And so it wasn't an easy task, but just tried to make it as relatable as possible across the board.
And it was, and that's why I was like, for all my, leaders and stuff like that, I'm going to get them this copy of this book, because I was just like, this is something that should be in everyone's toolkit. Because, one of the things like I find is that, like you said, with the new leaders, they don't get training. Mm-hmm. And I've inherited a team, and I'm realizing that they don't know how to give feedback.
Right.
And I was just like, oh gosh, how have we not taught them how to give feedback? So they can't give feedback, then how are they also receiving feedback? Right. And that threw me for quite the loop.
And that's such an important one today, because, that old model of, we give performance reviews once a year, or maybe once a quarter, you'll sit down with your boss and they'll give you feedback, and it just becomes a box ticking exercise, and it never amounts to positive feedback. And positive, I mean from a positive experience. It's usually the most blah, 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 blah exercise out there. And what we need and what we're moving towards are small moments of feedback in the moment, Hey, that was a great job that you did there. What did you learn from it? What can you do better next time? Or, hey, how did you think that went? I think we kind of missed the mark on it. What can we do better next time? Having those small moments of course correction is so much more powerful, so much more helpful, so much more effective than waiting for that kind of awful, 45-minute discussion, which isn't really a discussion. It's just like, I don't know. So it's just not fun.
No, it's not. And people forget. Like, I always make a joke. I never remember what I had for breakfast 2 days ago. Right. So giving feedback only at the, annual performance review, it's very daunting, and it's not very great. Like, if a chef is cooking something in the kitchen and they hear that one of the dishes wasn't great, do you wait till the end of the night to tell them after they produced 100 of those dishes, or you tell them right away?
And the other thing is, particularly if it's feedback that needs to lead to a behavior correction, often what we do is, as I'm sure you know, the same part of our brain triggers when we have to go into a difficult conversation as it does when we feel physical threats of harm. And so we have exactly the same fight or flight response. So it means for most of us, we flight. There are some folks out there that love the fight and they just go in far too strong. But most of us, we just paper over people's behavioral issues. We go, oh, well, they're having a bad day, or, if it happens again, we'll say something. And so we wait until the second or third or fourth or fifth time that we see that behavior kind of rearing its head. The problem is when we come to deal with it after 5 times, essentially we've said to the person subliminally along the way, that behavior was okay. And now you're telling me that it's not. What has changed? You as the leader must have changed, not me, because my behavior was accepted before. And so when my advice is always, when something, even if it just seems small or insignificant, just to at least have a conversation around it, try to nip it in the bud, is way better than waiting, like you said, to the end of the meal. So after your first bite, if you don't like it, let's have a discussion about it, rather than, having to try to get through the meal and then, lodging your complaint with the kitchen.
I love it. So what is next on your horizon? So you've done this first book. Are we writing a second book already, or?
I do have another book in mind, which would take some of the concepts here and just broaden it out into the organizational impacts. As I get towards the end of this book, I kind of start to talk a little bit about how to become a self-evolved organization. I think there's a whole raft in there that at some point I'll put pen to paper. For now, I'm just having fun talking to wonderful people like you, spreading the word about the book, trying to get it out there, and then we'll see what the rest of 2020 holds.
Oh, I'm excited because, like I said, I'm buying copies for everybody in my leadership team, so they're getting a copy for sure, and some of my peers too. This is brilliant. But for our audience out there, where can they get this book?
Sure. So it'll be available January 28th, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all good bookstores. Best place to find out more information and where you can get a copy is to go to selfevolvedleader.com, and you'll learn more about the book. You'll see some great resources that we're giving away on launch week, and then there'll also be a link to where you can go buy it.
Excellent. I can't wait. And really, I'm going to put everything in the show notes, so it's just click away so everyone can get to it really fast. Seriously, Dave, I cannot say thank you enough. This has just been a really great book, a really great conversation, and thank you for sharing this out to the world.
Thank you, Sapna. I've had a really good time with you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining and listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode, please share with your friends and colleagues. You can share on social media, the email link, the newsletter, and so on. Let's continue to support these Canadian innovators and help them really grow into bigger brands. Awareness and knowledge is totally key. Anyways, I can't wait to talk to you next week. Cheers.